Last night, Bernie Sanders drew a crowd of over 27,000 people in Washington Square Park in New York City. Now, that's how many people were actually at the rally, but many people are reporting that there are thousands or tens of thousands of other people at overflow areas looking on from buildings and things of that sort. So an absolutely massive crowd, apparently bigger than any crowd that Obama had during his first run, where he was credited for drawing massive crowds as well. Most media outlets, though, are not interested in that. They don't care about that or what it could possibly represent for New York, which is difficult to tell at this point. They're much more interested in what one of his supporters said while speaking to that crowd, and you'll see that right here.
Well, I agree with Secretary Clinton that Medicare for all will never happen if we have a president who never aspires for something greater than the status quo. Medicare for all will never happen if we continue to elect corporate Democratic whores who are beholden to big pharma.
So, which part of that do you think people had a problem with?
So I find it interesting that he referred to some of the Democrats who are standing in the way of progress. He referred to them as corporate Democratic whores. Is that what he said, right? And reflexively, the Hillary Rodham Clinton supporters, when he's talking about Hillary, why would that be your reflex? Oh, methinks that you protest too much. You have a guilty conscience. Because when he said corporate whores, nobody thought Bernie Sanders, did they? Nobody thought Bernie Sanders. Yeah. Nobody thought Ralph Nader. But they did think every other goddamn Democrat.
Now, you could say that he had said, I agree with Secretary Clinton, blah, blah, blah. And then later on he says the corporate whore, so maybe it could draw back to that. But in the middle, he talked about President Obama.
Yes.
And members of Congress.
Yes.
But people aren't assuming that he's talking about President Obama, who did stand in the way of certain forms of
yes, he did.
Reforms of the medical
He said he wouldn't
industry.
sign a bill that did not have the public option, and then he did exactly that.
Exactly.
In fact, he campaigned against the public option because he went to Dennis Kucinich's district and said, if this motherfucker's standing in the way, instead of going to Ben Nelson's district and saying he's the one standing in the way because he won't give you what you want.
Yeah. So that was Paul Song there. He's a healthcare activist. And look, many people are angry about this, and we're going to get to the apologies in just a second. And they should be angry. I think there's that expression that, no, not as angry as they are and trying to make it all about Hillary Clinton, which, look, since Hillary Clinton is in the race, you shouldn't use that word, obviously. Also, pragmatically, you shouldn't use the word because you know that her supporters are desperate to find any way that she's being unfairly targeted and to either make a big deal out of it legitimately or blow it out of proportion. And that has happened a lot, and so he should be far more careful. But when we're talking about such a huge problem, a problem that he is an activist trying to solve, the fact that we're more angry about the word choice than about many millions of Americans' continuing inability to get health insurance, many of those who have health insurance still not able to pay for it, that doesn't cause as much concern for many people, unfortunately, as his word choice. And I would say, one last point. There's that expression that never attribute to malice what's best explained by incompetence. Here's why he said it. Not because he wants to call Hillary Clinton a whore, but because he had a crowd of 27,000 people in front of him. He knows they're Bernie Sanders supporters, and he desperately wants them to think that he's awesome. And so he threw around the bombastic sort of language that he's seen Bernie Sanders use, if not that actual term. That's my theory.
I think almost nobody's paying attention to this. The only people who are paying attention to it are people that are already voting for Hillary Clinton or people that are already voting for Bernie Sanders.
But maybe some people in New York.
Dude, the people in New York, first of all, if they were going to vote, they had to register as Democrats back in October.
Back in October.
Okay, of that crowd of 27,000, how many do you think are actually going to get to vote? Mm-hmm. Probably not 27,000.
Maybe not. I mean, I would imagine that if you care enough to go out, you still might not have known about Bernie Sanders back in October, which is unfortunate.
I also think maybe the right term isn't corporate whore.
Yeah.
Maybe it's corporate John, because they're fucking us. Mm-hmm. It's not like they're getting fucked.
Yeah, people would probably still have a problem, but maybe not as big of a problem there.
Maybe not.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I just think generally you can make that point as Bernie Sanders constantly does. Bernie Sanders has never had to throw around the word whore to do it. So, empirically, you can do it without using that word, and since it does serve as a big distraction from the extremely accurate point that Paul Song was trying to make, I would have not said it. Now, he also apologized. He later said that he wasn't referring to Clinton, apologized for using the words to describe some in Congress, and he tweeted out, "I am very sorry for using the term whore to refer to some in Congress who are beholden to corporations and not us. It was insensitive. And Bernie Sanders, who I will remind everyone is not the person who said it, also tweeted this out. Dr. Song's comment was inappropriate and insensitive. There's no room for language like that in our political discourse. And again, just pragmatically, one of the reasons why I would prefer that he had avoided language like that is I have noticed what is an extremely annoying, and I think it should be a distressing trend in this primary, that people on Hillary's side who have seen in their past and have seen in politics legitimate sexist attacks against politicians, attempts to imply that female politicians don't have good ideas, shouldn't serve as president, all that stuff, who've seen that are so used to seeing it that they're then seeing it in places where it doesn't exist. So when Bernie Sanders interrupted Hillary Clinton at a debate, he was attacked as being a sexist, even though every man who debates men interrupts men in those debates. Hillary Clinton interrupts men in those debates. So Bernie Sanders was literally treating her the way he would treat every other man and the way he does treat every other man. So I like it when that is what they're claiming sexism in, because it's easy to show how false that is. When you throw corporate whore in there, it seems like, oh, well, it muddies the water and it makes it seem like there might be some legitimate sexism coming from the Bernie Sanders camp as well. And I don't want to have to explain that in great detail to everybody.
I don't think the guy should have apologized.
Really at all?
I'm with you.
No way, dude. Listen,
You don't think Bernie asked him
well,
to?
when he
here's the thing. Look, as much as everybody gets upset about language, and I get people get, they want to hear nice words, but at the same time, if you think about what these guys have done to the economy, they've condemned certain people to a life of, poverty. They've redistributed the wealth upwards in the country. They've approved everything from fracking to, in the past, nuclear weapons testing, to wars, to everything else. And there's never any consequence for it.
Never.
Yeah.
And people's lives are destroyed, communities are destroyed, and okay, so he used the word whore, which, by the way, you can use on network television. It's not that bad a word. It's not like, he called her the big C.
Right.
But,
It's in the Bible.
Exactly. Not that that's necessarily the standard we should go by, but, when you look at it, you think, okay, he's telling people what he thinks. I mean, I don't think you should tamp down on people's language. If you're upset, you got to curse sometimes.
And I would agree with you, and I would also say that if this also reveals the sickness of our culture, that people are upset that he used a word, instead of being upset about what he was talking about, was that poor people can't see a doctor because of corporate Democrats.
Yeah.
That's what's poor people can't see a doctor. We'll talk about that later. He said whore?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's wrong. No, what's wrong is that people can't see a doctor when they get sick in the richest country in the world. That's what's wrong. Not that somebody referred to politicians or possibly the richest people in the world as whores.